All right, so it is Mr. Stewart here with an assignment video for the bouncing ball part 2, and we're going to go through the ideas of kind of cleaning things up, making things look a little bit more finished, and going through the idea of using peg animation, which is just kind of the beginnings of getting into rigs and what those are. But the first thing you'll probably need to do is make a few adjustments based on the feedback that you're getting from your grader. So you might need to erase some different things, which you can go in very easily. Say I want to make this bounce a little bit higher in this area, or I want to kind of work out the arc here of this bounce. So I can do that a couple of different ways. I mean, I can just go in and start deleting things, which is probably the easiest way to do that. But I'm going to do this. Let's see. Let's say I want to keep the initial, well, let's say I want to do the whole bounce over again. So that's going to be from this frame until this frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and select those frames, and then right click and go to delete. So now I am going to refill in the bouncing ball, but I want to do it, say my grader said you should have maybe 4 or 5 more frames in there. So I can hit shift, hit the plus key, 2, 3, 4. I can hit that 4 times and add in 4 more frames. And now, for me, I want to do another planning page whoops, I hit a color card there. I want to do a planning page, so I'm going to do another drawing layer, and I will call this planning 2. Hit add. And now I'm going to go in and just very quickly, maybe using a different color, maybe using green, I'm just going to draw over the different layers. Now, what I can do is I can extend the exposure for the whole thing, like shift selecting everything, extend exposure. Well, that didn't work. So let me move this back to frame 1, and now I can grab everything and hit extend exposure. I think I will use instead fill empty cells or fill selection, and that's going to fill everything up. So now, regardless of what frame I'm on, then I should be able to just keep adding to, and you can see the drawing substitutions here. I could just keep adding to the drawing like this. And so if I can sort of see where my planning was, where my ball is going to bounce to, then this gives me a nice indication of saying, okay, I'm going to do something that's a little bit higher. And I know that I've got I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 frames to fill in, and this is one of those. Now I know that this is frame 21. I'm going to write that on there, and I'm going to write in this frame 11, and I'm going to write here frame 32, which you can see the frame number over here. Except that I was on the wrong layer, and now all of that is showing up. So I'm going to go in and that. So if I turn off the planning layer, you can see that I drew on the layer that I have activated, which was the ball animation. So I'm going to go in there and just delete those pieces here. Sometimes this happens. It's not a terrible thing that it happened to me, because these kinds of tricky little scenarios will happen all the time. So you just want to make sure that you're very aware of what layer you're on. Now I can write in 21. I can write in 32. And I can write in 11. And you can see now that if I turn off the ball animation, I still see, because I see all three of the numbers there, then that works for me. And so now I know I've got, I'm going to sort of work on either side, kind of working up and off this. So that would be frame 12. This would be frame 31. And then work my way up. 13, 30. And then I think from this point I can start doing some working on twos. So 15, frame 28. And what I'll notice is that I have an odd number here for 21, and these are all odd. So I can go 17 and 19 like this, and that's going to work right into that. But if I say 23, 25, well, that's going to change. That's going to change my numbering, and I want to keep that numbering uniform. So what I can do is I will go back to my ball animation layer here, and I'm going to hit the minus key and take one frame away. And then I'll just take one frame off of, I go back to the planning layer, and I will just, so this will now be 31, this will be 29, this will be, oops, I'm sorry, this will be 30. This will be 29. Now this will go back into working on twos and we'll be at 27. And now I could do two more, and I could do 23 and 25. Now that sometimes can feel a little bit confusing. The simple way of saying this is if I'm going to work on twos and ones all together, which I'm doing that, 11, 12, 13, 29, 30, 31, I want to try to make sure that I end up in a place where my frame numbers either are all odd or all even, because I'm going to be working every other frame. And that's just going to make my timing be more consistent. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's clear. If you have any questions about that, you can email me. But now I can go into the ball animation, and I can begin drawing in the actual drawings. Let me move the planning down here underneath. So I'm just going to move it under so I can see the black drawings over the top. And I could just go and work my way this way, except I still am on the planning. So this is why it's always so important to keep track of your layers. It can get really confusing and get to be a mess very quickly if you're not constantly looking back over there. Okay, so now I'm going to go to frame 15, because I'm going to go into twos. I'm going to go to frame 17. And I can turn on the onion skins here. Now you'll notice I'm gonna leave these blank for the moment. I'll come back and deal with the exposure in just a second. Add 29 and 30, and then we are bouncing. So turn the onion skins off, turn the planning off here for the planning too. And I'm going to shift select all of these, right click, go to exposure, and use that fill empty cells again. And that will just cleanly put in the exposure. So now I have created a change in my animation and been able to keep kind of the basics there. Now I could go back in and fill in the red if I wanted to. It wouldn't take too long, but it's not really necessary because what I'm going to do next is create a new ball that we're going to animate along this path. Now this is where we will sort of create a world where it's sometimes called 2.5D. Now, do you have to work this way? Absolutely not. If you want to clean up every drawing and make a new layer, clean up every drawing, color it, make it nice and pretty, and do a new drawing on every frame that we have our rough drawings, you are more than welcome to do that. And that's actually how I work. That's the old-fashioned way. And I love it, and I will probably do it forever. But the way that many television shows are made, and even some movies, are venturing into this world that I'm going to show you next. And so I want to introduce that to you, not because it's better or worse, but because it's available and I want you to know about it. Okay, in fact, let me do a quick demo of the old-fashioned way, and then we'll go into the new way. So I'm going to create a new drawing layer, and I will call this cleanup layer. And on the cleanup layer here, what I can do is I can turn the light box on, which will allow me to sort of work on this. I'm going to switch over to the pencil, and I'm going to draw. You know, I can look at, I have these centerline smoothing options. There's some other options here. I can snap to the grid. This will these will do little things that will close off my lines. I'm not going to mess too much with any of these right now because you can play around with what those do, but I am going to zoom in a bit so that I can try to get a better clean option, and I'm just going to kind of slowly create that clean line. Now when you then go in here, you can see that I've got these selected. I can move these different things around. But if I wanted to create a color, I could go into, let's see, what shall I do? I'll do blue here. And I could draw that in there. I could also begin drawing over the top in a yellow. And I'm going to add in a new color here. Just click on the color, double click on that, and begin to add in a yellow stripe using the pencil. And I don't think the, actually it did work. Okay, so you can see I can get, you know, a pretty nice effect if I want to go in and add in kind of a white highlight. Whoops, I'm in the wrong. I'm going to use the paintbrush for this. White highlight, or if I wanted to go in and add a shadow, I could create shadow layers, I could create highlight layers, and I could do that on every single frame. I could just say, okay, the ball is moving, and on every single frame I'm going to do a new drawing. But that can become very tricky, very difficult to do. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a peg on this ball. In fact, I'm going to make this ball just even a little bit more complicated, if you will, by adding in some red stripes and maybe even just a couple of different accents. Around this this ball. Okay, so so I've made my my ball here, and I'm pretty happy with it. And it's all on this layer. And now I'm going to create a peg for this. Now we used a peg last assignment video to globally shift the animation. Now I'm going to use a peg to animate on the peg. And that's when you're going to see things like animation, create a keyframe, those different things, you know, insert keyframe, these different things. And we'll use that on animating this peg. But you need to see that there are two different layers here. There's the drawing substitution layer, the drawing layer here, and right now it's only active on one frame. So I need to extend that again, shift select all of those frames, and then extend the exposure, which I always want to use that, but it really does work better, I think, if I say fill empty cells. Okay. But now I'm going to go onto the peg layer where you can see where it's P, and this is what I'm going to animate on. I'm going to click on this frame. I'm going to then insert a keyframe, or I can hit the F6 button, and you'll see that a little dot shows up. Now I'm going to go to frame 11. And I'm going to insert another keyframe. And by using this little control over here, which is the transform control, I'm going to take this and grab that center dot right there and move it over to this position. Now I'm not going to worry too much about squash and stretch just yet, but I'm going to find my major keyframe moments here. And I'm going to insert another keyframe, move this up here. Let me scroll back a bit. And get the hand here to move things around. And set this up. And I'm going to go back to selection tool here, actually to my animation tool, and I'm going to go to this frame, insert keyframe, bring this down over here, and find this. Now I can just move this over here and it will insert that keyframe. and then move this over here and insert the keyframe as it's bouncing off. Now, as we look at this, if I was to turn off my ball animation and just play this, you can see that I get a little bit of movement, but it doesn't look nearly as good as my other animation did. So I still have some work to do to line everything up. One of the ways I can do that is just kind of go in to these frames and begin to make sure everything is lined up. Now again, I'm not going to worry too much about squash and stretch just yet. I will do that on a different pass. Okay. So now, as you see the animation, it's sort of moving around the same way. And let's get that there. And sometimes it's a little tricky if we've done it on twos, but I want to make sure that I'm in in the right spot on the right frame. No, I don't want to do that. Move this over here. So, and what I mean by this is I'm trying to line up the keyframes with the first frame. So if I've worked on twos, you can see that my ball is going to continue to move. The computer's going to in between it. So I want to make sure that my blue ball is lined up. If a drawing is on twos, I want to make sure my blue ball is lined up on that first drawing, and that's where I'm going to put the keyframe. So that could take a little bit of work. And move that out there. And move this keyframe over here. Okay, so now if I take this, you can see that I have a similar movement to what I had with my animation that I drew, but it is much cleaner and allows me to get some of that energy. But now I'm going to work on squashing and stretching. Now the reason that I did the all the positioning first is because I want those keyframes to live with. Let's get this here. The position a little sooner than I want the scaling to happen. Now you can see here that if I start to rotate this, it's going to rotate from a center position. I need to move this pivot over to the side like that, and then now because I had set those keyframes on the position first, they are the ball is going to be in the same spot that I that I animated it. Because otherwise, the keyframes might, have me rotating things and pushing things around, scaling things a little bit differently. And I can go in there, begin working on the squash and stretch. I want to make sure I still think about volume and keeping my volume similar. And finish out all of the different squash and stretch here. And make that a little bit bigger. And then again, now I can look at my animation and I've got some nice squash and stretch that's happening with my animation as well. Now, this is where, different people like to work different ways. The movement of the ball, you can go in and adjust by adjusting these keyframes. So if I was to push this, that's the pivot, if I was to push this over a bit, like this, let's do this, you would see, well, see, I'm on the cleanup layer, and I've got to make sure I'm on the peg layer. So if I was to push this over like this, you would see that it would actually move it over like that. So this peg now becomes the central way that I'm moving around the ball and animating it. I could again rotate it a little bit if I wanted to. But it's going to rotate back and forth. So you have to sort of get used to that. Right now, I'm not going to put rotation in there. I think, just getting used to this idea can be, kind of enough to work on for this week. Okay, but the last thing I will introduce to you this week is one of the real benefits of Toon Boom, and that is that you can go in and you can do some different things with effects. Now you can do that. You can see these effects layers. You can start to play around with them. Some of them I think work pretty well. So if I were to put a transparency on this, I want to make sure that I grab the actual drawing itself before that layer, before I put in the transparency, and you can see that. And then I can double click on this star and I can control the amount of transparency, 25 versus 75 is going to be more transparent. If I want to get rid of that, I just right click and I go up to delete. That transparency layer, it's not going to delete my drawing, it's just going to delete the transparency. Now, one of the things you have to be careful though is if I have all this closed and I say, oh, I want to delete the transparency here, well, now I've selected everything because it's closed, so now it will delete the ball. So you want to make sure that, again, knowing your layers, knowing what you have selected in the layers is very important. So, but I'm going to do, because I want to do, here, I'll throw a shadow on there, and I'll go to Effects and Shadow. Now, throwing a shadow on there you would think would be that easy, but you have to do one extra step in order to get it to not just become a shadow, and that is to make a new layer of the entire setup. So you can close this. There's different options here. You can clone the drawings only, or you can clone, or you can duplicate. Clone connects it to anything that I do. If I make any changes on the master layer, it's going to change for everything. If I duplicate this, I'm creating a new clean thing that I can do whatever I want to with. And so I tend to like duplicating rather than cloning. Cloning has its uses, but I'm going to duplicate this, and here I'm going to put in form shadow, because that's what I want this to be. And I'm going to drag this up to the top, and then I'm going to open this up, grab the drawing layer, and then I'm going to go to the plus here, effects, and then shadow. Now you can see that everything got darker. And what it did was, now if I hide the ball, you can see that all is left is the shadow. But if I hide the shadow, then it gets bright again. Well, I can make one little adjustment to my layer here. I'm going to go up here, I'm going to grab the cutter, and I'm just going to kind of make a circle across there here and hit Control X. And now you can see it gives it a little bit more form. In fact, let me do that over again, and just do a little bit less. That'll give you a little bit better feel. Now that shadow is now animating along, and it's moving along just like everything else. So I get this little better sense of it fitting in the world that I've created. And now I want to make a drop shadow. But I find, what I mean is a drop shadow, I want to make a shadow on the ground. I'm going to probably have better luck doing this by creating a new layer and drawing this again, just like I did the ball, and animating it. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to create a new drawing layer right here, and I'll put in ground shadow. Okay, and I'm putting this underneath the ball layer. Then I'm just going to use the paintbrush, and I am going to draw in a shadow on the ground. I'm going to use the fill here, and now this only shows up on that one frame. Again, I need to go over here, click all these empty cells, exposure, fill empty cells, and now it's on the ground wherever I want it. Now I could go in and add in a shadow layer or a transparency layer on this. I'll use a transparency here, and now I have control of this. I'm going to make this about as light as the other shadows in my background, so I'll make that about, let's go a little bit lighter, let's go about 80. Okay, and now I'm going to then add a peg, so I'm going to grab that piece of the drawing, go up here and add a peg. And now you can see I have my ground shadow peg, and I'm going to make sure that I insert a keyframe here. Right click, insert a keyframe, and then I'm going to move it over let's just move it over ever so slightly. Here I'm going to connect it. Here I'm going to connect it. And here I'm going to move it off screen like this. So now, just by doing that, I have a little bit of a shadow that goes along with this. And I can add in some bounce if I want, just to go into that. Have that move over just a bit more. That's a little bit more, like that. And now I can get just a little bit of movement that happens. It doesn't work all that well here. Oops. And let's try having move that over a little bit more as well. So I could play around with this, but I can add in some movement along the ground, and I could do that pretty easily using some of the tools that we have, which makes for a little bit, like I said, a little bit nicer production value, a little bit more finished look to the animation. But this is a good example of how you can use pegs to animate over the top of what you've animated drawing. But by no means do you have to do that, as I said before. If you want to just go in, keep everything rough, keep everything very loose. You don't even have to get into color if you don't want. Okay, and now I'm going to talk to you about some things that might be a little frustrating initially, because you might not understand that certain things are happening. But in order to see them, we have to do what we call render. So you can see that the shadow is transparent, but it's not very soft. You can see kind of the softer edges of these shadows that I painted, and I want to match that. So I can go to this level again. I can go to Effects, and I can pick Blur. And then now that looks even worse, because now the transparency seems gone. It's this sort of dark bluish shape, and I can go in here, and when I start putting in numbers or whatnot, it doesn't really change anything. But if I were to hit this button right here that says Render and Play, it's going to ask me to render these again. I hit yes. It's going to bring up the render window, and in the render window you can see that that looks actually very different. Now I can zoom in by hitting the 2 key, and zoom out by pressing the 1 key, and then now I can look at this and say, oh, okay, so I do get my transparency back, and there's a bit of a blur. It's not as blurred as maybe I want it to be. So if I double click on the star here, I can double that. Let me go to 3. The tendency is to go like to 100, and if I go to 100, I'm going to blur it so much that it's going to be gone. You, in essence, won't even be able to see it. So I'm going to go with 3 here, and then render this again. And that's looking a little softer. That's looking a little bit better. Now I can do a similar thing with adding in, if I want to add in a highlight and use the glow, other different effects. So if for whatever reason an effect feels like it is the effect feels like it is not working when you put it on there, try rendering it and seeing if that will work. Okay, so in order for me to do a little glow, I could, let's see, how could I do this? I'm going to do another duplication of the original group. I'm going to duplicate selected layers. I'm going to rename this highlight. I'm going to want to make sure that this is kind of on top of everything because it's going to be on the very top. And then I'm going to rescale this, reshape this. Probably want to zoom in a bit. And come back here, kind of flatten this out, maybe turn it this way, kind of just put that right up there. Now I could go back in and let's see if I just made everything white. I can use the paint tool and just move my mouse around and it will fill everything up. Then let me see if I can scale it even just a bit smaller. And kind of place that where I want it. Okay. So now, if I were just to leave that the way it is, it's sort of just bouncing along as a highlight like that. I could, again, put a transparency on that and a blur, but I'm going to try doing just a glow effect. And double-click that. You'll see I have options for the blur type. I have an intensity option. I have an alpha option, which is a transparency option. Intensity, if I ramp that up to maybe 5, you'll see that it's going to really shine. I'm saying this, I'm hopeful. Yeah, it's going to be really too bright. And so I don't want to mess with that intensity too much. You can see that seems to work pretty well. So I'm going to see even at just the default, I'm going to blur the radius just a little bit. Actually, I'll maybe see if I can do 2. And now render this. And let me go in a little bit closer and see how this looks. So it's not terrible, but I think I'd want a little bit more of a blur. So let me keep messing around with this here. Let me go to 4. And then let me try making this 150, which is going to make it more transparent. Alpha, when I go down, I think that is going to make it more transparent. Transparency, when I go up, that's going to make it more transparent. So, and let's take a look at that, how that's looking. Now that's almost gone, so I probably want a little bit more and keep playing around with these settings. So let's go back to 2. Let's go to intensity of 2. And let's go to 175 and render this. and bring this back over here. So I'm getting closer. I think I like sort of that intensity level. I think I just want it a little more transparent. So sometimes you can see, you can play with these settings together, but you're really not going to see the outcome until you begin to render it. And let me see how that loops and plays. So again, there's a lot I could do to continue working with the animation, working with the shadow, making sure that that all feels connected and everything is moving along the path. But to give you a basic run through of how you can control and use these different colors, different tools is very helpful. In fact, you know, I just mentioned color. I wonder if I can play around just a little bit here with the initial color of this and see if I can get it to match in with my background a little bit better. Now I can do this over here in the color window simply by adjusting what I thought would be blue. So say if I want to change the blue to a red that I've got over here, well, now I can bring that that in. I could go back to the blue if I wanted. Let me see, and give myself just a little less saturation there, kind of ease it out. So I can go back in and begin working through you know, kind of changing these different colors. Let me grab this kind of grayish white and maybe go into a bit of a green from the, or a brown. I think that looks pretty good. I could even change the vectorized line by going in here and grabbing that. That's not going to be what I wanted because it is the black here. So let me go in here and get that. And I can change to give me that colored line appeal. I could even do a gradient if I want, and I can start with a little bit lighter feel. I can do this as a radial gradient like this, and so I can play around with the colors in this. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're changing your colors though, because you'll notice right here that the shadow I had colored black, and so now the shadow is now this brown because black was connected to it. So I should really go back in and just say light brown, white. I can use this as light brown as well. I can change these around, and then I can go in and create a new color, in which case this time I just want to do black. And I don't want a radial, I don't want a linear, I want a solid. And now I can say black. And then when I go back into the, I can go back into the ground shadow layer here, click on this first frame, and this is where using the drawing option would come in, because I've got so many effects, it's difficult to see it, but with the drawing layer, I'm going to see it just as it is. And then I can go in here and say, kind of clean all of that up, just click and hold on that, and now it is black again. And if I go back to the camera, you can see that that's there again, but it hasn't changed the other colors that I've messed around with. And so when I would render this or export this, then I'm going to see that as black again, the way it was before. And so there's little tiny things you can continue to do. You can continue to play around with. And then once you are done, it can get a little bit tempting to just work and tweak and do this forever. And instead of doing that, I recommend saying, give yourself a time limit. Say, okay, it's time for, it looks pretty good. You can always make it look better. But if we go to File and Save, you're always going to want to save. And then it is going to be ready for you to export and create your video. So you're going to go to File, Export, Movie. Now, if I go to my movie options here, the default setting that we've had has been the H.264. In the default, it has this faster encode single pass. You might want to up this quality level here. You might want to change these around, but we can start there and say, let's see if we can make it look a little bit better in terms of the colors. And let's see. Okay, so I gotta change that again. So let's go to Settings, H.264, faster encode. Let's set all here. Hit OK. And that should work. And now I'm going to put in a version number. I've done this a few times, but I'm going to put in version 2. I'm going to hit OK here. And it's going to export out my video. And when I open that up, it is looking a little better. But you can see if I look at these two together, and this depends on how picky you want to be, you can see that the intensity of the colors is a little bit faded. I actually kind of like that look, but if you want to get exactly the look that you have in the Toon Boom, then you're going to want to export out and set those options to none. Now, animation is another good compressor. That gives you millions of colors, which is gonna help. I'd probably put keyframes to all again. Let's try it with animation, see how that works. And now I'm gonna create version 3 so I can keep the H.264 version. And this takes a little bit longer. The more accurate you get to the color, the longer it's going to take. And animation, I think, has done a pretty good job of giving me an accurate representation of the color. And the file size, I think, let me check this, is bigger, but it's not going to be crazy big like you would get if you used no compressor. So I think that would be probably what I would recommend, unless you are in a situation where you have limited bandwidth, because this one using the animation is about 100 megabytes. The video using the H.264 is about 5 megabytes. So remember, you're going to have to upload this video to your Google Drive folder, and that maybe is going to be better if you use the smaller version. So just giving you an understanding of what those different compressors can do. So here we are, and this is the end of the bouncing ball assignment. We're going to learn similar things, but other things as we move into the next assignments. If you have any questions, please let me know, but you would upload this to your week 3 bouncing ball part 2 folder. And so after you've done that, then get ready for the wave assignment and have a great week.